The rain pounded down with relentless force, turning the streets of Clarksville into rushing streams and pools of murky water. The late afternoon sky was a tapestry of dark clouds, and the air was thick with the smell of wet pavement. People scattered, scurrying for cover under awnings or disappearing into dimly lit storefronts. Shoes slapped against the soaked concrete, and umbrellas strained under the weight of the downpour. But for Laura, there was no shelter. Her old sedan shuddered and came to a clattering halt by the side of the road, steam hissing from under the hood like a wounded animal. She rested her forehead against the steering wheel, willing the engine to miraculously restart. Nothing. Laura exhaled, her breath unsteady. She had worked a double shift at the diner. Her feet ached, her clothes were stained with fryer grease, and all she wanted was to be home to tuck in her daughter. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed her thin jacket and stepped out into the rain. It soaked through the fabric in an instant, chilling her to the bone. Water pooled around her worn shoes as she scanned the road, hoping for a good Samaritan. Cars sped past, splashing water onto the curb. Her chest tightened as reality sank in. She was alone. "Need some help?" The voice came from behind her, startling her. She turned to see a man approaching through the rain, his overalls drenched, but his expression open and kind. He looked to be in his early 30s, his dark hair plastered to his forehead. There was something grounded in the way he moved, like he was used to the weight of long days and hard work. "Yeah," Laura said, her voice rough with exhaustion and cold. "I guess I do." The man extended a hand. "I'm Noah." She shook it, surprised by the warmth in his grip. "Laura, my car just died," she said, her voice faltering. "Let me take a look," he said, moving past her to pop the hood. As steam rose around him, Noah leaned in with a practiced eye. His hands were rough, stained with grease from years of work. He didn't flinch at the rain or the heat radiating from the engine. Instead, he examined the radiator. "Busted radiator," he said after a moment, meeting her gaze. "Not what you want to hear, but we can get it towed. I've got a garage not far from here." Laura opened her mouth to protest, to insist she'd figure it out herself, but her words caught in her throat. There was something in Noah's expression of quiet sincerity that made her feel safe, even if only for a moment. "Thank you, really." Noah shrugged, already pulling out his phone to call for a tow. "No big deal. Everybody gets stuck sometimes." As they waited, the rain showed no signs of letting up. They pushed the car off the road, water splashing around their ankles. "You're good at this," Laura said, trying to make conversation and distract herself from the cold. "Been fixing things since I was a kid," Noah replied, his voice low but not unfriendly. "Had to. Things broke a lot in my house." He paused, as if deciding how much to share. "What about you? Late shift?" She nodded, tucking a damp strand of hair behind her ear. "Yeah, single mom. Gotta make it work, you know." He nodded, and they fell into a companionable silence, broken only by the patter of rain and the occasional hiss of passing cars. When the tow truck finally arrived, Noah directed the driver with easy confidence. Laura was grateful just to have a moment out of the rain in the warmth of the tow truck's cab. Back at Noah's garage, Laura followed him inside. It was small, filled with the scent of oil and metal, but it had a certain charm. Mismatched chairs surrounded a coffee table covered in old magazines, and a vending machine hummed in the corner. "Not the Ritz," Noah said, handing her a towel, "but better than outside." "Much better," Laura agreed, wiping her face and shivering a little less as Noah got to work. She watched him through the window, separating the waiting area from the garage floor. He moved with purpose, the lines of his face serious, but not harsh. She saw the care he took, the attention to detail. This wasn't a job to him. It was a craft. Eventually, Noah came back, wiping his hands on a rag. "You're patched up enough to get home," he said. "Won't last forever, but it'll hold for now." Laura stood, reaching for her wallet. "How much do I owe you?" He shook his head. "Nothing." She frowned, surprised. "No, really. I don't want a freebie. It's not a freebie, he said, a touch more serious. Call it a favor if you want. Pass it on to someone else who needs it. For a moment, Laura was at a loss for words. Thank you, seriously. Take care of yourself, Noah replied, a faint smile on his lips. Roads aren't getting any drier. When she drove away that night, the rain had lessened to a drizzle, but it felt different. Less like a burden, more like a reminder. A stranger's kindness, unasked for and freely given, had given her hope she hadn't known she needed. Morning light filtered weakly through the window of Noah's small kitchen, casting pale beams over the cluttered table. Bills were strewn about, their stark black numbers a constant reminder of the weight he carried. Noah sipped coffee that had long since gone cold, barely tasting it. The electric bill was overdue. The water bill wasn't far behind, and rent loomed at the end of the month. He rubbed his eyes and leaned back in the chair, feeling every ache and pain from years of manual labor. He'd long ago accepted that his life would be a constant cycle of work, debt, and small victories that quickly slipped away. His garage paid the bills barely, but there was no cushion, no safety net. Every month was a gamble, and he was tired of betting against the odds. His gaze drifted to a worn photograph propped against the salt shaker. Mason, his son, grinned at the camera, a gap-toothed smile that spoke of carefree days and scraped knees. Noah ran his thumb over the image, guilt settling heavily in his chest. Mason lived with his ex-wife in another state. Noah visited as often as he could, but it was never enough. He sent money when possible, but it always felt inadequate, like a patch over a hole too wide to fill. Noah pushed himself up from the chair, willing away the familiar mix of regret and determination. There was work to be done. The garage was a few blocks away, a cramped space that smelled of motor oil and rust. It was nothing fancy, but it was his. The day dragged on in a blur of clanging tools and the metallic tang of grease. He kept his head down, focused on fixing what he could, both in his work and in his life. Hey, Noah. Carlos, his part-time assistant and longtime friend, poked his head around the corner. Phone call for you. Who is it? Some guy asking about a luxury car repair. Didn't give details. Noah sighed. Noah replied. People often called his garage by mistake, thinking he had the resources of a larger shop. I'll take it. As he picked up the phone, a wave of static crackled. Noah's garage, this is Noah. The voice on the other end was smooth, professional. Mr. Noah, this is Edward Harlow. I believe you helped my wife, Laura, a couple of days ago when her car broke down in the rain. Noah paused, momentarily thrown. Yeah, I remember. Is everything okay? Everything is more than okay. Thanks to you, Edward said. My wife spoke very highly of you. I'd like to thank you personally. May I come by? Noah hesitated. It wasn't often that customers, especially well-to-do ones, wanted to visit his garage. Sure, he said, trying to sound casual. I'll be here all day. Excellent. See you soon. Noah hung up, a strange tension settling in his chest. Why was this man coming all the way to thank him? Most people would have sent a note, if anything. He tried not to dwell on it, but as he worked, he found himself glancing toward the door more than once. By late afternoon, he heard the unmistakable rumble of a high-end engine. Noah wiped his hands again, trying to ignore the nerves that twisted in his gut. A sleek black sedan pulled up to the curb, its paint so polished it reflected the overcast sky. The door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, confident, impeccably dressed. Everything about him spoke of success, of a world far removed from Noah's. The man approached with measured steps, his eyes scanning the garage. No, that's me, Noah said, setting down his wrench. You must be Mr. Harlow. Edward, the man, corrected, extending a hand. His grip was firm but not overbearing. Thank you for seeing me. Noah nodded, unsure of what to say. I didn't do much. Just fixed her radiator. Enough to get her home. You did more than that, Edward said, his tone earnest. Laura was exhausted, vulnerable. You treated her with respect, and went out of your way to help. In this world, that's no small thing. The words hit Noah harder than he expected. He'd grown used to people overlooking the small kindnesses, the late-night calls, the unpaid favors. "I'm glad she's okay," he said simply. Edward reached into his pocket and pulled out an envelope, offering it to Noah. "Please, this is a thank you." Noah stared at it, his hands reflexively moving behind his back. "I can't take money for doing the right thing." Edward's expression didn't waver. "I know you didn't help for money. That's why I insist." He held the envelope closer. "You have a family, bills, a business to run. Consider it a gesture of appreciation." Reluctantly, Noah took the envelope. He could feel the weight of it, the thickness of the bills inside. "It's too much," he murmured, shaking his head. "It's exactly what you deserve," Edward replied, his voice firm but kind. "But that's not the only reason I'm here." Confused, Noah crossed his arms, the envelope clutched tightly in one hand. "What do you mean?" "I own a chain of luxury auto garages," Edward explained, his gaze steady. "We work on high-end cars, classics, imports, restorations. I need someone trustworthy to help run one of them. Someone who knows how to work hard and do the right thing, even when no one's watching." Noah stared at him, the words not fully sinking in. "Why me? You don't even know me." Edward smiled. "I know enough. My wife trusts you. I trust her judgment." Noah felt the room shrink around him. This was too much. A job offer, a lifeline he hadn't dared to dream of. "I don't know what to say," Noah muttered. "Say you'll think about it," Edward said, clapping him gently on the shoulder. "This isn't charity. It's a chance to bring your skills to a place that needs them." Noah nodded slowly, his throat tight. "I'll think about it." "Good," Edward said, his eyes warm with sincerity. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." As Edward turned to leave, Noah glanced down at the envelope again. He knew it wouldn't solve all his problems, but it was a crack of light in a world that had long felt closed off. "Edward," he called out, his voice steadier than he felt. "Thank you." Edward paused, his smile broadening. "Thank you, Noah, for everything." When the sleek sedan disappeared down the street, Noah stood alone in his garage, the sounds of the city slowly filling the silence. He opened the envelope with trembling hands, $5,000. More than he'd ever held at once. But more important than the money was the chance, the possibility that his life, his work, his future could be something more. He thought of Mason, of their phone calls that always ended too soon, of the promise he'd made to himself to be more, to do more. Maybe, just maybe, this was the first step toward keeping it. Noah spent the next few days in a fog of disbelief, alternating between cautious hope and gnawing doubt. He kept Edward's offer at the edge of his mind, like a delicate object that might shatter if he examined it too closely. The envelope of cash sat on the kitchen counter, untouched since he'd placed it there. He couldn't bring himself to spend a cent of it. Doing so made the offer feel more real than he was ready to accept. Instead, he threw himself into work at his small garage. Every bolt tightened and engine tuned was a way to ground himself in the present. He didn't tell anyone about Edward's offer, especially not Carlos. They'd built the garage together, through sweat and grit, and Noah felt a pang of guilt every time he thought of leaving it behind. One afternoon, as he adjusted a stubborn carburetor, Carlos leaned against the doorway, a smudge of grease on his cheek. "You've been distracted," he said, his tone casual but probing. "Just tired," Noah replied without looking up. Carlos snorted. "Liar. Something's eating at you. Spill it." Noah paused, the wrench clutched tightly in his hand. "It's complicated." "I got time," Carlos said, crossing his arms. "And you're my friend, so talk." With a sigh, Noah set down the wrench and wiped his hands. "Remember that woman whose car broke down in the rain?" "Laura?" Carlos nodded. "Yeah, you fixed her up for free, right?" "Her husband came by," Noah said, the words coming slowly. "Turns out he's well rich. Owns a bunch of high-end garages in the city. He offered me a job managing one. For a long moment, Carlos was silent. Then he let out a low whistle. That's big, man. It is, Noah admitted, his voice tight. Too big, maybe. Why? Carlos asked, genuinely curious. Noah hesitated. What if I'm not ready? I've never worked on luxury cars or dealt with fancy clients. What if I screw it up? I'm barely keeping this place running. Carlos studied him, then walked over and picked up a small metal wrench, twirling it in his fingers. Noah, I've seen you fix cars people gave up on. I've watched you work through the night because you didn't want to let a customer down. You're good at what you do. More than that, you care. That's rare. You think a fancy title or some shiny cars are going to change that. It's not just about the cars, Noah said quietly. It's everything. I'd be leaving you, this place, everything we built. Carlos cracked a smile, though there was a trace of sadness in it. Man, this place will be fine. I'll keep it running. Besides, you're not leaving me. You're just leveling up. He clapped a hand on Noah's shoulder. You got to take this chance. Not for me. Not even for you. For your son. Mason deserves to see his dad succeed. Noah swallowed hard, the weight of Carlos's words settling deep in his chest. He'd never thought of it that way. Not just as an opportunity for himself, but for Mason. I'm scared, Noah admitted. I'd be worried if you weren't, Carlos said, his tone softened. But fear is just a sign that you care, and that's a good thing. For the first time in days, Noah felt the tightness in his chest loosen. Thanks, man. Don't mention it. Now get back to work, Carlos said, grinning as he walked away. This place isn't going to fix itself. The next morning, Noah called Edward and accepted the offer. They arranged for Noah to visit the city garage and meet the staff. The drive there felt surreal. He wore his best clothes, slightly worn but clean, and did his best to quiet the nerves that danced in his stomach. Edward greeted him warmly at the entrance, shaking his hand as if they were old friends. I'm glad you decided to come, Edward said, leading him inside. We've been looking forward to this. The facility was everything Noah had imagined and more. Sleek sports cars gleamed under bright lights. Rows of state-of-the-art tools lined the walls, and technicians moved with the precision of surgeons. Noah couldn't help but feel like an outsider, a man from a dusty small-town garage surrounded by luxury and polish. Edward introduced him to the staff, emphasizing Noah's experience and the values he brought to the team. Some greeted him warmly, others with polite indifference. Noah tried not to dwell on the skepticism he saw in a few faces. He would prove himself with work, not words. His first day was a whirlwind. He shadowed senior mechanics, observing the intricate work that went into repairing high-end vehicles. The learning curve was steep. Luxury cars had systems he'd only read about. But Noah's hands were steady, his mind sharp. He asked questions when needed, offered help where he could, and never let his pride get in the way of learning. By the end of the day, exhaustion weighed heavily on him, but there was a flicker of pride too. Over the next few weeks, Noah immersed himself in the work. He learned how to diagnose complex engine issues with digital systems, how to handle the quirks of classic restorations, and how to navigate the sometimes prickly personalities of wealthy clients. It wasn't easy, but he thrived under the challenge. Edward checked in often, offering guidance but never micromanaging. He treated Noah like an equal, not a subordinate, and that respect fueled Noah's determination. One evening, as Noah was locking up, Edward approached him. How are you feeling? Edward asked. Hired, Noah admitted, but there was a hint of a smile. But good. I didn't think I'd like this as much as I do. Edward nodded, his expression thoughtful. You're doing more than liking it. The staff respects you. Clients trust you. I knew you'd be the right fit. Thank you for believing in me, Noah said, his voice sincere. Edward's smile widened. You make it easy. The transformation in Noah's life was gradual but profound. With a steady income, he paid off lingering debts, repaired his old truck, and sent more money to support Mason. He visited his son more often, their bond growing stronger with every trip. One weekend, Noah brought Mason to the luxury garage, showing him the high-end cars and letting him shadow the work. Mason's eyes sparkled with excitement, and Noah felt a surge of pride. "You really work here, Dad?" Mason asked, wonder in his voice. "Yeah, buddy," Noah said, ruffling his hair. "I really do." They spent the day together, Mason asking questions and watching every move. For the first time in a long time, Noah felt like he was building a future worth sharing. One evening, as Noah closed up the shop, he noticed Laura standing by the entrance. She smiled when she saw him, her expression full of gratitude. "Edward told me you were doing well," she said, stepping forward. "I guess I am," Noah replied, a little sheepishly. "Because you earned it," Laura said firmly. "You changed my life that night, and now you're changing others too." They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unspoken hanging between them. Finally, Laura extended a hand. "Thank you, Noah." He took her hand and shook it, feeling the warmth of genuine connection. "Thank you." As she walked away, Noah felt a sense of completeness, a reminder that even the smallest acts of kindness could echo far beyond their moment. The rain had come and gone, but it had left something behind: hope, growth, and the promise of a brighter tomorrow. Noah's life continued to change in ways he'd once only dreamed of. The luxury garage became his second home, a place where he put everything he had into the work. He rose early, stayed late, and earned the respect of his colleagues with his relentless dedication and humility. The transformation from the small-town mechanic who'd once struggled to make ends meet to a trusted leader in a high-end shop was complete. But with every success, Noah kept his feet firmly on the ground, reminding himself of where he'd come from and who had helped him along the way. One day, as he was finishing up a tune-up on a classic European sports car, Edward approached him, his expression thoughtful. "Walk with me, Noah." They stepped out of the garage, the crisp air of late autumn carrying the faint scent of leaves and motor oil. Edward led Noah to a small garden area behind the facility, a peaceful spot most of the staff used to clear their heads during breaks. "I've been thinking about something," Edward began, his gaze fixed on the rustling branches of a nearby tree. "This place has thrived because of people like you, people who bring skill, dedication, and heart. But I keep coming back to what we talked about months ago, about legacy." Noah listened, sensing the weight in Edward's words. "I want to do more than run a successful business," Edward continued. "I want to give back, and I believe you're the key to making that happen." "How?" Noah asked, genuinely curious. "I want to create a program, a training center, that gives people from struggling backgrounds a chance to learn this trade," Edward said, turning to face Noah. "People like you. People who need a second chance, who have the potential but not the opportunity." The idea hit Noah hard. He thought of all the people he'd known, friends, neighbors, even himself, who had scraped by, unable to break free from the cycle of hardship. A place that could teach skills, provide hope, and open doors. It was more than a good idea. It was a calling. "I'm in," Noah said, his voice firm. "I knew you would be," Edward said, clapping him on the shoulder. "I want you to lead it." Noah designed the program. Mentor these people. Build something that lasts. Noah nodded, feeling the gravity of the task, but also the thrill of purpose. "We'll do it together." The months that followed were some of the busiest of Noah's life. He worked with Edward to find a suitable building, a modest but sturdy facility near the city's outskirts. He helped design the training curriculum, drawing on years of experience to create lessons that balanced hands-on practice with technical knowledge. He reached out to local organizations, spreading the word about the program, and met with community leaders to ensure they had support. The first wave of trainees was a diverse group: young adults looking for a fresh start, older workers hoping to change careers, and even a few people who'd fallen on hard times and were desperate to rebuild. Noah poured himself into his role as their mentor. He showed them the basics, taught them to respect their tools, and reminded them that mistakes were just another step in the learning process. One of his first trainees was a young man named Jamal. At 19, he'd already seen more than his fair share of struggle. He was quiet, withdrawn, and skeptical, traits Noah recognized all too well. Jamal rarely spoke, and when he did, it was with an edge that warned people to keep their distance. But Noah didn't give up on him. He offered encouragement, even when Jamal dismissed it, and praised his progress, even when the young man shrugged it off. Late one evening, after most of the trainees had left, Jamal lingered in the garage, working on an old engine that had refused to start. Noah approached quietly, watching as Jamal wiped sweat from his brow and glared at the machine like it had personally insulted him. "Need a hand?" Noah asked, keeping his tone casual. Jamal shook his head but didn't move away. When Noah stepped closer, together they examined the engine, tracing wires and checking connections. "It's not working," Jamal muttered, frustration thick in his voice. "It's close," Noah said. "You've done good work. Just a few more tweaks." Jamal looked up, surprise flickering in his eyes. "Really? Really?" Noah said. "You've got talent, Jamal. Don't let a stubborn engine tell you otherwise." They worked in silence for a while, and eventually, the engine sputtered to life. The roar filled the garage, and Jamal's eyes lit up with a mix of disbelief and pride. For the first time, Noah saw a smile, small, hesitant, but real. "Thanks," Jamal said, his voice barely audible. "Anytime," Noah replied, clapping him on the back. "You earned it." Moments like that became the heart of the training center. Noah saw transformations not just in skills, but in confidence, hope, and self-worth. Every success, no matter how small, was a reminder of why he'd taken on this mission. One evening, as Noah was closing up the facility, Mason arrived with his mother. They'd planned a weekend together, and Noah had promised to show Mason what he'd been working on. Mason's eyes widened as he took in the training center. The rows of cars, the tools, the people hard at work. He watched as his father guided trainees, answering questions, offering encouragement, and demonstrating techniques with a practiced hand. Later, as they sat together in Noah's office, Mason turned to him. "You help a lot of people here," Mason said. "I try," Noah replied, a mix of pride and humility in his voice. "It's important." "Why?" Mason asked, genuine curiosity shining in his eyes. "Because someone helped me once," Noah replied, "and because everyone deserves a chance to make something of themselves." Mason nodded thoughtfully. "I'm proud of you, Dad." The words hit Noah harder than he expected. He pulled Mason into a hug, feeling the warmth of his son's arms around him. "I'm proud of you too, kiddo." The training center grew, attracting attention from local media, community leaders, and even industry professionals. But through it all, Noah remained the same, dedicated, humble, and driven by a desire to lift others. He never forgot where he'd started or the people who'd stood by him. One evening, as he prepared to leave, Edward found him in the garage. "You've built something incredible here," Edward said, a hint of awe in his voice. "Couldn't have done it without you," Noah replied. Edward shook his head. "You would have done it anyway." Noah smiled, feeling the truth of the words. He had found a way, through the rain, through struggle, through every doubt and fear, and now he was giving others the same chance. The rain that had once felt relentless was gone, replaced by clear skies and the promise of something better. But Noah knew that even if the storm returned, he'd be ready, because kindness, resilience, and the belief in second chances would always see him through. The training center continued to flourish, becoming a beacon of hope for the community. Word spread about the program's success, attracting trainees from neighboring towns and sparking interest from businesses eager to hire skilled, dedicated workers. Noah's reputation grew as a leader who didn't just teach people how to work with their hands, but showed them how to believe in themselves again. Despite the long hours and countless demands, Noah remained grounded. He knew that every life changed at the training center was proof that even the smallest acts of kindness could echo in unimaginable ways. It was a lesson he never tired of teaching, not just to his trainees, but to himself. He thought often of the rainy night when he'd first met Laura and how the simple choice to help a stranger had set everything in motion. One afternoon, As Noah supervised a group of trainees working on an engine rebuild, he saw a familiar figure enter the garage. It was Jamal, now wearing the confident expression of a young man who'd come into his own. Since completing the program, Jamal had secured a job at a reputable shop, but often returned to volunteer and mentor new trainees. Noah felt a surge of pride as he watched Jamal offer advice and encouragement, remembering the wary, withdrawn teenager who had first walked through the doors. "Hey, Mr. Noah," Jamal called out, his voice strong and sure. "You got a minute?" "Always," Noah replied, walking over. "I wanted to say thanks," Jamal said, his gaze steady. "Not just for teaching me how to do this work, but for everything, for not giving up on me." Noah placed a hand on Jamal's shoulder. "I didn't do it alone. You put in the work. You believed in yourself when it mattered." "Because you showed me how," Jamal said quietly. The moment hung between them, heavy with meaning. Noah nodded, feeling a lump in his throat. "Keep paying it forward, Jamal. That's how we change things." "I will," Jamal promised. As the years passed, the training center expanded, adding more workshops and programs. Noah brought in additional instructors, some former trainees, others experienced professionals who shared his passion for giving back. The center became a cornerstone of the community, a place where hope was rebuilt one skill, one opportunity, and one act of kindness at a time. But amid the success, Noah never forgot his roots. He still visited his old garage in Clarksville, catching up with Carlos and helping with repairs whenever he could. The garage remained a symbol of where he'd come from and a reminder of the people who had believed in him before anyone else did. One weekend, as Noah prepared for Mason's visit, he felt a mix of excitement and nervousness. Mason was older now, a teenager with interests and opinions of his own. The bond they'd built over the years was strong, but Noah worried about how the demands of his work might affect their relationship. He wanted Mason to see not just the accomplishments, but the heart behind everything he did. When Mason arrived, they spent hours at the training center, working side by side on a project car. Mason asked questions, not just about the work, but about the people. "Why do you do all this, Dad?" he asked, genuinely curious. "Because people matter," Noah said simply. "Everyone deserves a chance. When I was struggling, someone helped me. Now it's my turn." Mason nodded, seeming to understand on a deeper level. "I think that's pretty cool." They worked in comfortable silence for a while until Mason spoke again. "Do you ever think about doing something bigger, like even more people?" "I think about it a lot," Noah admitted. "But it starts with this. One person at a time." One day, as Noah prepared to lock up for the night, he heard footsteps echoing in the empty garage. He turned to see Edward standing in the doorway, a satisfied smile on his face. "Got a minute?" Edward asked. "Always," Noah replied, echoing his earlier words to Jamal. Edward joined him near one of the workbenches, his expression thoughtful. "The city council reached out. They want to partner with us to create a network of training centers, not just one, but multiple sites, modeled after what you've built here." Noah felt a rush of emotions, pride, fear, excitement. "That's incredible." "It's because of you," Edward said, his voice steady. "You've shown what's possible when we invest in people." Noah shook his head, humbled. "It's because of everyone who believed in this. You, Laura, Jamal, everyone." Edward's smile softened. "So, what do you think?" Noah didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." The expansion took years, but it became a legacy greater than anything Noah had imagined. Training centers sprouted up across the region, each one a testament to the power of compassion and second chances. Thousands of lives were changed, families rebuilt, hope restored, and communities strengthened through it all. Noah remained a humble leader, never seeking recognition but always striving to lift others. On a warm spring evening, as he stood in the first training center he'd helped build, Noah reflected on the journey that had brought him here. He thought of the rain-soaked night, the weight of past struggles, and the kindness of strangers. He thought of Mason, now a young man with dreams of his own, and of the countless people who had found hope through the work they'd done together. Noah knew that life would always bring challenges, storms that threatened to drown out hope. But he also knew that every act of kindness was a lifeline, a thread that connected people, lifting them from despair and carrying them towards something better. It was a legacy he would cherish forever. As the sun set, painting the sky in hues of orange and gold, Noah took a deep breath and smiled. The journey was far from over, but he was ready for whatever came next. Because kindness, resilience, and the belief in second chances had not just changed his life, they had built a world worth fighting for.